So welcome everybody to another session of the SoCal Soaring Porch Chats. And this evening, we're pleased to have Bill Palmer. He's a CFI at Warner Springs, and a long-time pilot of big jet planes, which we flew for United Airlines, right? And you also, I can't remember which of the Pacific jets you flew, Bill? You're muted, Bill.
Delta, and the most recent was the A350.
A350, yeah. So, so definitely a lot of skill and knowledge in the world of flying and big planes. But with that, we're going to turn it over to Bill to talk about the always ongoing topic of thermaling and how to best get into those thermals, stay into those thermals, and enjoy your life at altitude. So go ahead, if you've got your screen up, I've let you share your screen. Take it away, Bill, thanks.
All right, can we see that okay now? Oh,
Sure
there we
can.
go.
Yep.
All right, so this is kind of based on an intro to thermaling video that I put out recently on my YouTube channel. So some of it's fairly elementary and some of it is open for sharing, because a lot of it is, how do you do it? How do we think about it? And talk about some of the things that all these methods have in common. So as far as thermaling, we're going to go over why thermaling skills are important, the models of thermals, entering them, centering them, and leaving them. Okay, obviously it's important to thermal nicely because you can get off tow earlier, can stay up longer, climb faster, go farther, and increase your cross-country speed. Now, you may think, if you're an early cross-country person, hey man, I'm in no rush, right? Why do I want to increase my cross-country speed? Well, the day is only so long, and you don't want to be far away when the day dies. So when you're thermaling, when your ground speed is 0, and nothing averages like a 0. So you want to be able to thermal efficiently and move on. So how should we think of thermals? What do they look like? There's a couple different conceptual models. The one we think of most often is the column, a rising column of air, which gets a little bit wider as it rises up, with a more strong lift in the center, usually descending air around the outside of it, especially on the downwind side if it's moving with the wind. Another is a bubble model. And here we see happy glider in the bubble and guy right below him going, where's the lift? So that may be, one concept where, why is the guy above me doing so great and I can't find anything down there? Well, it may have been a bubble, kind of like a scuba diver's bubble of air coming up from underneath in the water. It's up there. It's it released and there it is. And then the other model is a plume, or kind of a couple of sources of rising air coming together in one area, maybe from different directions, and possibly causing multiple cores within the thermal. So we kind of think of a thermal as a relatively circular area with a stronger lift in the middle, with one or two or multiple cores, kind of the plume model, more represented by multiple cores on the right, usually surrounded by sinking air for whatever reason that sinks there, whether it's just the turbulence around it causing the sink or whatever. But we often see that there. Often drawn as an issue like this, where the center of the thermal has the strongest lift, and as you go farther away, it gets weaker, and on the outside of it, of course, is sink. So as we approach the thermal, we often find that there's sink around it. As you come along, you find the sink. It's a lot of times it's I consider get ready, not like, oh my God, we're in sink, let's turn around, but could be a thermal ahead if you hit it right. Well, feel the surge is often the first indication of it, a possible little airspeed bump. We see the airspeed come up a little bit as the glider's inertia stays, keeps the glider in position, and the increased air comes in, we get a little airspeed bump. That could be an indication before we get the vario to show that we've actually already climbed some. So those are good indications that you're getting close to the thermal. So the vario has a lag, and a little typo there. So we, I'm sorry. So we want to actually turn into the thermal before the vario peaks, because our peak climb is going to be before the vario shows it. So don't wait for it to peak before to turn is the point there. If we're going, if we need to react faster if we're flying at cruising speed, and if we're already slowed down, then we don't have to worry about running too fast, turning too quickly. So we're going into a thermal. Which way should we turn? Well, maybe the same way that other gliders are turning. Or if you have a wing that's suddenly lifted, turn toward the lifted wing. There may be clues from the clouds. Which way is, has the north side of the cloud or the sunny side of the cloud been working? Try that way, or just guess. But it's important that you do something and not just fly through it, trying to decide which way to go. So they're only going to last so long. 4 seconds, you're through it. And now it's something behind you that you don't know where it is. So one of the early clues for thermal, you make a turn, and in the first 90 degrees, you're out of it. So you know what? In that case, it's probably too small. Maybe best to just move on instead of trying to turn around and hunt for that tiny little speck. Unless that's the only thing going and you really need it, it may not be worth working. If the list is lost after the first 90 degrees, but before you turn around, you probably turned the wrong way. We had a 50-50 shot, right? So we turned the wrong way. So how do we solve that? We continue our turn so that we track 270 degrees from our entry heading and just go to the other side and then turn again. It's recommended to not change your direction of turn, but once you've started to turn one direction, keep going that way. Changing your direction of turn is a really easy way to put you completely outside the thermal and kind of get lost as far as where that rascal is. So here's the 270 entry method. If the first turn direction doesn't work. So as we circle in the thermal, things we'll think about are speed to fly. What speed should we use? Well, we need to maintain a stall margin. We need to try to be close to the minimum sink speed. We need to think about the bank angle we're going to use and the thermal size. The bank angle we'll use is going to affect the circle size and our efficiency, as well as the size of the circle. So tighter circles take up more energy to fly, and we have to kind of balance that out. So let's take a look at speed to fly. Everybody should probably be familiar with this concept. The minimum sink maximizes our climb and lift, which of course, if we could just stop, we'd do that, but we can't. So we're going to have the speed for minimum sink, which increases with the square root of the load factor. Well, who wants to do that kind of math in your head while you're flying? So there's really only a couple numbers to know. If we look at a 30-degree bank, which should probably be at the minimum that you would use for thermaling, that's 1.15 Gs. Square root of that is just about 7%, 1.07 or something very close to that. So we can think of it in round terms as a little less than 10%, and that's going to be close enough. For example, the dual minimum sink speed, wings level in a 233 is 42 miles an hour. 10% of that is 4. A little less than 10% is 3. 3 plus the 42 is 45. The actual mathematical number is 44.9. So that's pretty darn close, and certainly more accurate than the airspeed indicator can be. So a little less than 10% more for a 30-degree bank is plenty accurate for us. For a 45-degree bank, it's 1.4 Gs. We should be able to feel that. And probably don't want to be banking much more than 45 degrees at any time. So it's going to be the other side. At 1.4 Gs, the square root of that is like 1.178 or something. So it's almost 19%. Let's round that up to 20%. Easy to do 20%, just multiply it by 2. So 20% of 4.2 is 8 point something. 42 plus 8 is 50. The actual number is 49.6. So again, we're within, half a mile an hour And that's plenty close because it's a heck of a lot more accurate than any of us can fly. So those are the speeds that we should look for as far as minimum sink while we're thermal. Now, how about the bank angle? What bank angle should we use and what effect is it going to have? So if you fly faster, you have to make, it's going to make, if you fly faster than necessary, it's going to make bigger circles. You're going to be on the outer parts of the thermal. And shallow turns also make big circles. So we have to avoid that. So let's take a look at what effect it has. So for example, a 45-degree bank is half the size of a circle flown at 25 degrees. Well, that's a pretty big difference. And a 45-degree bank is less than 3/4 of the size of one made at 30. So, you know, we can see that, you know, having a really shallow bank can have a pretty dramatic effect on the size of the circle. Now, if the thermal's that big, if the cloud overhead is giant, great. You know, 30 or 25-degree bank is quite efficient. And if you don't need to spend energy to stay in it, you know, you can fly that giant thermal circle very nicely and not have to give up any energy to climb tightly. Here's a relationship between bank angle, turn radius, and sink rate. This is for a 233 I plotted, but you can see as we come along here that for bank angles less than 30 degrees, you don't pay much of a sink rate penalty, but you get a huge difference in the turn radius as you increase the angle of bank. Once you get past 30 and 40, you know, beyond 40, 45 degrees, now you really don't change the turn radius all that much, but you start to pay a real big penalty in sink rate, you know, as you increase the angle of bank. So the sweet spot is right in here, the 30 to 45 degree bank angle. Right there. So that's where you shoot for, unless you've got a giant thermal that you don't have to spend that energy on. So just point out that the 126, which is a low performance glider by almost any measure, is a thermaling superstar. Well, how can that be? And if we the reason is because it can fly slowly with a low sink rate, and it can stay right in the core of the thermal with you know, without having to go 45 or 50 degrees. So it enjoys a high efficiency turn in the core of the thermal and goes right up the middle, while the super glider 3000s, you know, spin around the outside going 50 knots. The Soaring magazine's Glider Aerodynamics Puzzler, one of my favorite articles that comes out every couple of months in the magazine, almost always compares the 126 to all these other gliders, even though it's, you know, a 50-year-old glider or more. Here we have the 126 compared to a DG-1000, PW6, and the 126, you know, it beats them all. It just beats them all. So let's take a look at centering methods. And I got a couple. You guys probably have a few more. I'd like to see if you can share. So the simplest one is what we call the best worst sector. We'll talk about you know, one ways to think of it as a 60 degrees after the worst vario indication, a surge method, one put forth by Russell Holtz, one by Huth, who's a world champion racing pilot, and another method called, you know, increasing your bank, or increasing lift to straighten, and you're decreasing lift to steepen the bank. Let's take a look at each one of these. So all these methods have in common of kind of keeping track of the circle's performance. Where, as we go around the circle, is the best lift, identifying the strongest and weakest part of the thermal, and then trying to shift the circle to put the glider back in the stronger lift, either using wings level for a few seconds with a constant bank, constant airspeed turn, or varying the bank angle to shift the circle. So let's take a look at these various methods. And obviously, the objective is just to move our circle from sticking out halfway in the thermal to being centered on it like that. That's all they have in common, that particular goal. So the glider flying handbook offers a couple different methods, illustrated like this, all kind of smashed together in their book. Now, the simplest one is the best worst method. Basically, we're looking at, hey, where are we getting the best climb and where are we getting the worst climb? Just keep track of at least that much, then we know what we're going to do. This method is put forth by the Glider Flying Handbook, Bob Wander in his Art of Thermaling Made Easy, as well as anybody seen Eric Cardin's Easy as 1, 2, 3 thermaling method. That's basically the method that he espouses in that as well. So for this method, we kind of keep track of where, as we go around the circle, where was a good lift, and use, I'm on the south side. Well, as you go around the circle, okay, I'm on the south side, I'm getting this many knots. I'm on the east side, I'm doing this. I'm on the north side. Oh, it's getting good here on, on the west side, etc. Or, I'm on the side of the thermal closest to the lake or closest to the city or the mountain or whatever, just so you can keep track of the circle as you go around. So here we are sticking halfway out in the circle. And as we go around, we decide that, I want to move this circle to the north or up in this case. So as we're facing in that direction where the strongest thermal is, in the general direction, so not facing toward the area where the strong lift was, but just in that general direction, we're just going to go wings level for 2 to 3 seconds. Now, at that point, after 2 to 3 seconds, we're not in the stronger lift yet. It's still off to the side. Don't wait until you're in strong lift to turn back. We only want to shift our circle a couple 100 feet, and this will do it. So we move about 2 or 3 seconds, and then we start a new circle. And now we have shifted our circle there, and then the process starts all over again with our new location, judging how it's going to be. Now, the next method is one where you feel the surge as you enter the thermal again, straighten up for 1 or 2 seconds, and then resume the turn. And that should move you in a little bit closer like that. So a lot of times the feel is the first thing you notice, a little airspeed bump, the seat in your pants, not waiting necessarily for the vario. Another way to think of it is now in this case, the worst actual climb or the sink was kind of at the bottom of the picture, but the vario has a lag. So if we're watching the vario doesn't show the worst point until a few degrees after, maybe 30 degrees later in the turn. So from that point, we're going to wait about 60 degrees of turn and then go straight forward. And this turns out to be basically exactly the same result of where was it worst and where was it best. And just now we're looking at the vario versus thinking of, where it was, which way was the best way, in the general direction. And so that's kind of just a different way to think of the same thing. Now, Russell Holtz in his training manual for gliders puts forth a little bit more complicated flow diagram. So in this diagram, basically there's a couple of rules that you follow as you go through the lift. So as we encounter lift, if the lift is increasing, so we get into and we fly straight. And then as long as the lift is increasing, we fly straight. Let's keep going up. It's getting stronger, it's stronger and stronger. It's good. If it gets to the point, so now it's the same, we turn 90 degrees, whichever way. And as long as the lift is constant, you keep turning. If it starts to decrease, you turn 180 degrees, go back the way you came. And then, you get back in the lift, you fly straight as long as it's increasing. Once it's constant, then you keep turning 90 degrees around in circles. And that's kind of the flow diagram, the rule of it. It kind of looks like this. So number one, we enter the lift is increasing, so we fly straight. And now the lift is kind of the same in here, it's constant, so we turn. And in this case, we kind of turned the wrong way, but we didn't know that at the time. So lift is constant, we keep turning. Now it's starting to decrease, so we're going to turn around and go back the other way, 180. Now the lift is increasing, so we go straight. And number 4, increasing, keep going straight. Now it's kind of starting to be the same. So let's turn turn 90 degrees, it's still constant, still turn 90 degrees. You just keep going around in circles as long as the lift stays the same, doesn't get any better or worse. So that's Russell Holtz's methodology there. You can remember those rules. You can do it that way as well. So the Huth method puts forth in a document called Flying Faster and Farther. There's a link on my website, thesoaringpage.com, for this. But basically, this is, instead of using a constant bank circle and moving the circle, we're going to use a varying bank angle to move our circle. And so we never have to really roll out. We're just going to change the bank angle a little bit. So the initial bank starts out at around 30 degrees. So again, we've already discussed 30 degrees is kind of the minimum for thermaling, for efficiency's sake and whatever. And once you feel the surge, you start to increase the bank to 45 to 50 degrees for about 300 degrees of turn. So most of the turn, and then you can shallow it by 5 or 10 degrees. I like to think of this increasing the bank as, I want to stay here. So I'm going to increase my bank and make my circle tight because this is where I want to be. I'm in the strong lift. Right, so kind of looks like this, where we're coming around the circle where the little airplane is now is where it starts to be strong, is where the surge is coming into the thermal. We tighten the turn, and we can see it no longer sticks out into the weaker lift outside the thermal. It stays inside there, and we follow it all the way around for 300 degrees, and then we can shallow it out and make a constant bang turn. And that's kind of the I want to stay here methodology, just by increasing the bank angle. One of the commenters on the YouTube video said, hey, here's the method I use. As the lift increases, then I flatten the bank angle. And as it decreases, I steepen the bank angle. So it kind of looks something like this. It says the greater the change in lift, the greater the change in bank. And he says that gets them back in lift, usually in 3 turns or less. So that's something to consider. As far as how long do I stay in the thermal? We're leaving, so, hey, passengers, if you can only put up with so much going around in circles, we may think it's fun, but, after all, I think I'm ready to go back now. Is like, that's your clue that you should probably stop going around in circles. We're coming up on our minimum cloud clearance, whether it's clear of clouds or 500 below, depending on where you're at. The thermal is weakening, a concept called the height band, where, the thermal isn't strong all the way. It's going to peak out. And the last bit of it, the top part of it, you don't want to spend the last 20 minutes gaining 100 feet. When you've lost, you're down to 75% of what you were getting before, it may be time to move on and look for, use that altitude gain to go somewhere to the next thermal to move along. I don't want to waste all day getting every foot you can get out of the thing. Maybe you've lost sight of the other thermaling traffic. You don't know where he is, and you don't want to have a midair. So let's leave and let's just go out and try to figure out where everybody is. Maybe come back in, but you don't want to risk a midair when you lost sight of somebody who could be directly below you or above you, and you don't know what's going on. You're not be able to talk to them, or you're drifting away. You're drifting in the opposite direction you want to go. You know what? Maybe it's time to move on. Or you're getting low, you need to land. You can't circle if you just want to spiral, kind of attrition thermal your way down, where if I get any lower, I won't be able to make it home. So I need to go. Or you're getting tired, got to pee, time to go, getting dark or whatever. It's just like, you have other time constraints to go. So we should have an idea of where we're going to go before it's time to go. So all the time you're thermaling, you should be looking for, where's the next cloud? Where do I want to go? What's the next waypoint I want to go to? Who do I want to chase? Whatever, whether it's clouds, other gliders, or the direction of course. Don't wait until the last second to go, oh, now I don't know where to go now. I know I have to leave, but what am I going to do? So, always during the thermal, looking for your plan for maybe a couple of different plants. Watch those clouds cycle. What's the one that's coming alive right now? And so that's what I found. What is everybody else used for your methods and your struggles with thermally? Walt?
Yeah. John Chapman said, watch your barrier or spin the prayer wheel, your choice.
Yeah, Walt here. I think I primarily use that Huth method. It's pretty simple. You know, you kind of go and you do a shallow bank once you make a decision, and then when you get in the stronger lift, you can rack it up and see if it sticks. And if it doesn't, or you fall out for half of a turn, then adjust accordingly. And in rare occasions, I'll do a 180-degree reversal, change direction. Maybe it's on the other side. When on entering a thermal, what I'll do is loosen up my feel of the stick and just get rid of the grip. Just really try to feel the glider and what it's doing. And that'll give you an initial indication of which way to turn. And that seems to work pretty good. You feel the bubbly edges. You know you're flying through the edge of it, and you know it's around here somewhere. Where's the kill? I got to find the kill. And then you go, is there an indication? And then you turn. Sometimes you don't get an indication. You just, like you said, Bill, you just pick a direction and then adjust accordingly. And sometimes you know there's bubbly thermals around, and you really need one, and you feel that this is a good area. So sometimes you'll do a hunting and you'll just kind of meander around because you know there's something there. And you do that for a little while until you feel it's just wasting time and then move on. But oftentimes you'll find the core by that meandering around. And by the way, that's where the hawk helps out a lot. When you do get a good lift, the initial surge, you get a solid indication with the hawk vario. So that helps.
Okay, there's the hawk sales pitch right there. So, all right. Yeah, sometimes I'll have a fairly, if I'm looking around, okay, this one's not working or whatever, just kind of a real shallow bank to kind of, widen my search circle to see if I can, pick up where that was, or if I fell out, I'll just head upwind because I probably fell out and the thermal is now above me, leaning over into the wind. So head upwind and see if I can hit it, coming back into it.
Yeah, Bill, another thing to imagine when you're flying along is that the thermal areas are not just random. They're like networks of fishnet, hexagons, like a fishnet. And when you enter a thermal area along these fishnets, which are like little mini convergence zones, along that fishnet edges, there will be thermals, the stronger cores you'll climb in. But there'll be a lot of areas where it's just kind of bubbly. And so you might want to just kind of, it's a fishnet. Can I kind of find it? Can I find a line where I can just kind of make progress down course? And eventually you'll find the strong core that way. And that seems to help. If you give up right away and go right on course, you might be going through the center of the hexagon, which is the sink area or definitely no lift area until you get to the other side of this hexagonal area of lift. And when you get into that bubbly area of lift, it's around there somewhere. The question is, how much time is it going to take to center it? And right. Can you do it quick enough? And if you can't, maybe you can make progress by just searching left and right and trying to make progress down course. Other times I'll just make 90 degrees to my course and go searching that way, especially when you're under a cloud, because there's something there somewhere.
You got to be here somewhere, especially the flat bottom cloud. Yeah.
Those are my comments. Hi, Cindy.
I guess I've got one or two questions for you, Bill, or for anybody in the peanut gallery. So if I'm got a 30-degree bank going, and I think I'm, in the, somewhere in the general vicinity of the thermal, but suddenly, my high wing gets pushed more and higher. indicating to me, I thinking that I must have flown through the core, which was what pushed my high wing higher. So the question is, should I, circle around and do that 180 thing, or should I do a quick opposite bank to try to go more towards the core, towards the wing that got pushed up? Should I suddenly turn the other way to get back in towards the core? That's something I've experienced. I'm not sure which.
Yeah. By the
I
way,
would,
if you
Go
do a
ahead.
quick reversal, if you do, make sure you're really clearing yourself, because somebody
Right.
might be doing the same thing. You'll run into them.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good. Yep.
I think the general rule that would apply for me is don't change your direction of turn, unless you have to, like somebody else is going the
Mhm.
other way,
Yeah.
but
Right.
keep the same direction of turn and just try to, okay, now that the stronger lift is on that high wing, is trying to push you out of the thermal, right? So
Right.
you're gonna come around, you're gonna widen your circle toward that direction, the direction
Yeah.
that wing was pointing when you came around, and just move it that way. Flipping the circle all the way around, is more likely to have you flop out on the complete outside of the thermal, and lose kind of the orientation as to where everything was, and have to
Sure.
start all over again.
Right, because it takes too long for you to compensate for the turn you're already doing, to level and then turn. By that time, you've like you say, you've probably gone completely out of it.
Yeah. What does
Well-
Cindy have to suggest as far as what do you teach and what have you, in your own experience, like to do?
I tend to stretch or ellipse the circle. I will very rarely flip to a figure eight. If you draw a figure eight on a piece of paper, you see that those two ovoids only touch in one small portion of the arc. So no, I generally don't teach students to do a reversal for traffic clearance, for geolocating, for reorienting a circle where 300 degrees of that circle is going to be in different air. And so, no,
Right.
I tend to stretch or ellipse rather than flip.
Exactly. How about for centering methods? Do you like the best worst, or do you like to vary the bank angle a lot?
I generally teach varying the bank angle and keeping speed and horizon reference for speed control fairly consistent. I think the consistent thermaline speed becomes more pertinent, particularly if you join other gliders in a thermal.
Sure.
If you are a beginning pilot or a pilot who has upgraded in equipment and in performance in LD and handling, that sort of thing, the gliders are quieter. The speed change of 8 or 10 knots can be almost imperceptible to a person who has stepped up in LD performance. That quieter glider will accelerate, and that maybe 5, 8, 10 knots of variance in speed stretches and ellipses the circle hugely more than little bank angles. Typically, I'll tell students in thermal centering to shallow to stretch in the direction that they wish to relocate. I'll say shallow for counting 2 potatoes. You say, okay, I want to stretch this circle to the north. We're shallowing and unbanking 1 potato, 2 potato, bank right back in.
Right.
And that 2 seconds of adjustment is 160, 180 feet linearly in terms of ellipsing the circle. That's a big adjustment. Folks don't realize how much adjustment that would be of a circle if they had a pencil hanging from their belly and scribing that arc on the ground. They don't know how much that relocation would be just by adjusting 2 seconds of a variance of 20 or 15 degrees of bank angle.
Exactly. I try to emphasize myself, let's just take a little nibble at it, 2 or 3 seconds. And then we'll see, maybe you have to move it a little bit more, but much better than overshooting it and going too far, right? And we make, okay, we'll move it. Now we'll reassess, and maybe we need to shift it a little more, slightly in a different direction now to kind of fine tune it.
Well, once you shift it, you tend to see now, the strongest part is in a slightly different position. So you're kind of slowly, by doing what you're saying, you're slowly figuring out, you're fine tuning where the core is, it seems like. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little tweaks.
Yeah, Walt Rogers here. I would say I do a reversal 1 in 50, 1 in 100 times. So it's not very common. It's pretty rare. And it has to be very obvious. I mean, like you turned and you immediately left the lift. It's like, oh, I'm on the wrong side. Then I'll do a reversal. But if that's not the case, it's, like I say, most of the time I'll just keep making the minor adjustments like you're talking about.
I have a question about our lovely blue days, which we have plenty of. Is there any way to, so is there any way to gauge which kind of thermal you're looking at, which you're feeling, which I can't think the answer is no. And then any way to know what the thermal size is, because certain, like this time of year, we get those weak winter thermals. I mean, is there any way to gauge, oh, it's a little tiny thermal and I'm just, this is not even worth trying to stay in it because there is no core, it's just a little bubble.
I think it's going to depend on the ground feature that's going to trigger it. If it's some little feature, the typical thermal that's in this one spot, tends to be fairly small, or the one up on the mountain tends to be a little bit bigger and fairly constant in location. And then sometimes it's really not well connected to the ground, so that there have been those days where you have to, the lift is nearer the clouds, and once you get it, you have to stay up there. If you fall below, there's these beautiful clouds up there, and when you get below a certain altitude, halfway up or less, there's like nothing. So it does kind of depends on the situation. You have to kind of feel it out, whether it's a get high and stay high day, or I'm working this one thermal at this particular place, or just happen to catch something out in the middle of the open area, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. I guess the lesson is, I'm not necessarily trying to figure out which one it is, but they don't all necessarily behave the same. And don't spend a whole lot of time going, I must be able to find this thermal. There's a guy above me circling, therefore it must be here. Well, not necessarily. It could have cycled and he's got the last bit of it and you don't.
Yeah.
How about some of our newer pilots here? I see Jeff and Eric. How do you guys, what's your experience as far as getting your head wrapped around this, and how have you found easy as a way to conceptualize what models have we taught you that you found kind of resonated in your way of thinking?
Hi, here I'm Center here in San Jose. I fly around Hollister, and thank you, Bill. I watch your YouTube channel and I learned the 1, 2, 3 method. It's really helping.
Thank you.
So yeah, so my question is around a specific type of thermal in windy mountain area. I'm talking about like the mountain around Hollister area. So what I encountered was like there's certainly wind. And when I'm circling, hit some lift and trying to circle, I can feel like sometimes you're into the wind, sometimes you have the tailwind, and it's the variable like go up and down, up and down. It's really hard to center. Sometimes I got confused, like, is this a real thermal or is this just the effect of I'm going into the wind and leaving the wind? So any comments on this kind of thing?
Well, I haven't flown up at Hollister, but remember also that if you're flying an uncompensated vario, if you're pitching up and down to correct for some things, every time you change your speed, the vario is going to react, right, with a stick thermal or a stick descent that's not necessarily reflective of the strength of the thermal itself in that area. So being able to keep your airspeed fairly constant is going to help as far as being able to rely on the vario as any kind of indication of what's the good part and what's not.
Yeah, I think the glider I flew in that situation has total energy problem.
Okay.
I tried my best to keep the airspeed constant, but I believe there's the thermal, but it's in the mountain area, and when it's windy, it's really hard to core it. The same method will work in a flat land or some like big calm days.
Yeah, sometimes they're bumpy and it's hard to hang on.
How much bank angle are you using, Z?
40 to 45 usually.
Bank tighter.
Okay, okay, I'll try.
So John Chapman chimed in on the chat. He said, initial thermal size is the square of the straight line lift duration. 5 seconds of lift is a large thermal, easy to capture. 2 seconds, should I bother? Not if I'm gonna go somewhere.
Yeah, I find if I'm flying through lift, if it doesn't last, 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, it's probably not big enough to circle in.
Mhm.
Right.
And what I will say to the student to select a thermal that's large enough for them to be useful is, as you first encounter that indication of lift, 1 potato, 2 potato, check for traffic. I don't care whether we're going right or left, check for traffic. Look at the vario. If it's still lift, turn 45 bank. Now, 1 potato, 2 potato, check for traffic, turn. That's big enough to use. If it's not still lift at checking for traffic, it's too tiny to really be useful.
Right.
John can do it the science way. Cindy does it the language arts
I
way.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm making notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 potato, 2 potato, check for traffic, turn.
Yeah, I agree with
Let's
Cindy on that.
go.
I think
Yeah.
that's good advice.
And I like the other Cindy, 2 turns, you haven't gone up, get the hell out of there.
Yeah, like don't circle in sync. Right?
Yeah.
Don't go through the same bad air twice. Don't just
Yeah.
sit there circling, going, it should be here. I want it.
Somewhere, where is it? Yeah.
No, it's not here.
Now
Move
you
somewhere
say
else.
two turns and you don't get it and get the hell out of there. Not necessarily. If you're really needing a thermal and you look up ahead and you say it doesn't look as good, you might want to do a little more search pattern before you just abandon your course line. It really depends on how high you are and how badly you need one. But if you're in a bubbly thermal area, there's probably something around there. And sometimes a little more patience pays off. I tend to be an impatient guy. I tend to get low and I'm going cross country and just abandon things. As I'm getting older and wiser, I make a second or third try, but it depends on how aggressive I want to do to win the day.
Sure.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Greg Schibler had a comment. I think I unmuted you, Greg.
Thanks. Yeah. So on the notion of not stopping if the lift doesn't last for a few seconds, I'll almost always try to turn, especially if I feel a wing bump up at all. Just because if you happen to hit the outer edge of a thermal, you'll fly through an edge and it won't last long at all. There could be a really big thermal off to the side.
Right.
So I'll usually always try to move a little bit that direction, and if it doesn't get better soon, no more than a 90-degree turn, and just turn back. the way you're going.
Yeah, I think especially if you've just flown some pretty heavy sink, it's like, well, that's a pretty good indication there's something pretty strong around here going up.
Right.
You know, if the air is going down this fast, you know, somewhere in the vicinity of it.
Sure.
Unless it's wave, you know, and then that's a whole different story. But
Right.
you know, then you cruise along a whole line of lift of sink and like, what's going on here? Anyway, that's a whole different day.
Yeah, that's a whole different scenario. I guess speaking of my earlier question about, you know, blue days, one of my soaring pals, Christian Lignan, he talked about just doing these very gentle sort of slow S flying when you're flying straight ahead. And I don't know why that necessarily means you're going to be more likely to bump into thermals. I don't quite, I mean, it initially made sense to me, but then I'm thinking it more like, not necessarily. I mean, why would you hit more likely to hit a thermal if you're doing a kind of a slow S pattern versus just going straight ahead? I don't think there's really any value in that.
I think it has value if you're just searching and you're sensitizing yourself to really try to feel the air. If you're in a bubbly area, that kind of makes sense just to do that. And then once that bubbly air goes away, okay, the heck with it.
Right.
Straight line on.
Right. Sure.
So it makes a little sense. Depends on what you think the characterization of the thermal area is you're flying through.
Right. I guess the kind of day it is, maybe. And yeah.
It might depend on how much altitude you have to spend.
Right.
Right. So if you're really high, you got some altitude to spend. I can search around and I don't have to be, you know, worry about, you know, making it to my alternate or home or whatever.
Yeah.
But you always got to be, you know, be able to make it somewhere. It can't be, well, it's got to be here somewhere because I really need it because I can't make it anywhere now.
Yeah, that doesn't that doesn't pan out. Yeah. All right.
Hey, I'm going to call on some of my students. Jeff, what's your experience, your conceptual model? What's easy, what's hard? Unmute.
Oh, let me get Jeff. Hold on.
How's that?
Yeah,
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, I've had some great thermal experiences with Bill. We've gone up to Palomar, and I think we've gone over the 1, 2, 3 method. You know, one circle, 2 checks, and then 3/4 correction. I think the challenge for me as a student pilot is really knowing what side of the glider is the right wing going up, left wing. Where is that? What side of the glider is that lift? And then turning into the lift, and then knowing, like Cindy was saying, how much 1, 2 seconds how far you have traveled. And I wait too long, I shoot past the other side of the thermal and I miss it, and then I spend time trying to center or find it again, and at that point I've lost a thermal and I'm in heavy sink. So that's been some of my challenges, is knowing what side of the glider the lift is at, and then obviously just being patient, doing that 1, 2 count, and then to center. So, but it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
Thanks. Yeah, obviously, if your wing gets lifted, it's the upwind wing. It's trying to throw you out, so you got to go back to against what it's trying to do to you. You can't just, if you're passive, it'll toss you out of the thermal. You want to go the other way back into it.
Right.
And sometimes it's sometimes you can't, because everybody's already circling in the opposite direction to that. It's like, okay, I'll have to come back around, or sometimes it's like, I've been making right turns all day. I think I need to make a left turn now. There's some people like, I only turn right, or I'm terrible at turning left. Well, then practice more turning left.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to do it in both directions, because you could be called on to do it in either direction. What if everybody's circling left and you're coming up? You're going to pass the thermal up because everybody's turning left? No, you can't be doing that.
No.
Right?
Yeah. I know we always have the tendency to be one side or the other, but you're right. You need to be able ambidextrous. Okay. Well, we're coming up on about an hour now, so if there are any other questions, any other comments, please chime in.
I was just going to ask Bill, I'm sorry, my technology stymied me this evening and I didn't log in at the beginning. I tried to log in at the beginning. Bill, do you ask or teach your students to center or to orient themselves visually in the thermal by the strongest lift related to the particular heading that they see, or the strongest lift by their seated position on the arc of the thermal? If we're circling counterclockwise, if we're circling left, and if we are on the east side of the thermal, our view is north.
I usually describe it as
The strongest portion. I mean, there's two very distinctly different ways of orienting yourself. And sometimes for a pilot, it's helpful for them to understand how they orient themselves. Do they think about the strongest part of the lift correlated to what they are facing, or the strongest part of the lift according to where they are physically progressing around the arc of the circle?
I describe it as we're going around the thermal as, okay, we're on the north side. This is the best part so far. As we come around, now we're on the east side. It's not so good. Now we're on the south side. This is the worst part. Now we're on the west side. And the good side was the north side. So we need to move our circle north. So as we're heading north, that's when we're heading in the direction that of the good part of the thermal, that's when we'll go to 2 or 3 seconds and then, start again. So I kind of narrate it in that way as we're on the north side, here's what we got. We're on the east side, south side, or whatever, and just try to, point out there's the ocean, that's the west side, here's the desert, that's the east side, whatever, and just try to, or whatever landmark, from where we're at, it's easy to north, south, east, west is fairly easy to point out. So that's our landmarks that the way I describe it.
Okay.
Haven't anybody complain about being confused yet, so.
No, and but there are those two different schools of locating a person's self, and it's described sometimes differently in literature. So for someone like Jeff or someone like Z, who are a little earlier in their soaring experience, for them to mentally think about that when they're sitting in the living room rather than when they're sitting in the cockpit, that can help them be more specific about how they stretch their circle toward the area of strongest lift until you've got 8 knots all the way around.
There you go. Correct.
Right. I think that's the easier way to think about it than, okay, the strong lift is now we're heading east. So therefore we need to go north. I'm like, what? So,
Right.
so here's what
I've had students try to locate themselves that way. And that's,
so
that's tough.
what else. I'm going to share my screen for one more second here and we'll see what else I recommend. And that is playing with it on paper. Right. So, okay, we've gone into this thermal and I made a circle and now what am I going to do? I get back into the thermal. So just kind of play around and pretend you're flying. And
so the northwest side of that offered the best lift.
Right. So I straightened out for a few seconds and now I'm circling with fairly constant lift. Exactly right. So, learn the rules, on a piece of paper and just pretend you're flying around and making these decisions based on that kind of thing. So that can kind of help conceptualize, what am I going to do? What am I feeling? Which way should I go? Kind of thing. So
that's good.
That's a good exercise to do.
Yeah, that's an excellent exercise. I really like that visualization because you can kind of relate to your hand motion as to you flying the plane and
Yeah.
so Cool. That's a good, very good tip. I like that. Oh, let me, there was a comment, one other comment by our pal John Chapman. Thermals often coexist with shear, convergence, or cloud streeting. Therefore, keep your options open and don't lock on a single mode of lift. Good point. I mean, yeah,
Indeed.
yeah. I mean, we
yeah,
get we
especially-
get convergence. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I mean, we often fly that convergence line, at Warner Springs, 100 miles, right, of that. It's
Right.
just, so it's basically a line of thermals or shear or whatever it is. And, it basically behaves like thermals when you're flying in it, as far as being able to climb, other than the fact that you can just also go straight, if you're under the clouds, sometimes you can just cruise along. From cloud to cloud is not really having to stop at all, but that's a different subject.
Sure. Yeah, there's another comment from one of our AVSC pilots, Maciek. His comment is, did anyone discuss the time to complete a full 360 turn? I recall an article in SA magazine, the author said something like 22 seconds, if that was what he recalls correctly.
Yeah, 20 seconds, I think, is pretty close to average time to turn. And therein is where, when you get into some of the flight computers, it's like, what time period do you want the average to be taken? So you can take some of that into consideration. I don't really do a lot as far as, taking those statistics and making decisions on them much, but I'm not competing. So
yeah, in the cockpit, I never think about time. I mean, that's something you think about after you're thinking about it around a table like this, because my sense of time is very warped, depending on when I'm up there. Is it 10 seconds? Is it 20 seconds? I don't know. I
Right.
don't keep track of that.
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of what Cindy was talking about. Keep your situational awareness for north, south, east, and west.
Mhm.
It's also way useful for navigating, right, Cindy?
yeah.
Well,
So
yeah.
you want to keep that and then use that as your basis for which way to shift.
Yeah, I find that it's real easy to just be going around in circles and just kind of lose track, just kind of circling and really not paying attention onto where you are in the circle. So it's, sometimes just saying it out loud, I'm on the north side, here's the good side, okay, and just kind of remind you as you go around, how the lift is in each part of the circle, so you can kind of hear yourself and know which way you want to go, maybe.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, in Kansas, that doesn't work too well, keeping track of north, south, east, and west. I have struggled with that from time to time,
Yeah.
especially
Well,
up
there you
around
got all
cloud
those-
base. And you got to roll out on course line. Got to pay a real close attention. That's where the flight computer in the line that to the next turn point helps. That's how I
Well,
navigate.
And sometimes out there they got all those roads. Every mile is another road, a crisscross. I remember, that I learned to fly in New Jersey, and some of the books were illustrated like that. And I was like, okay, well, that's just an artist. And then I moved to Michigan, and the roads were like that. I was like, oh my God, this is real. It's like the road, all this grid goes north and south. I can tell which way I'm heading just by looking at the ground.
Yeah.
So
Thank
depends on
God
where
we
you're at,
don't.
what you got to see. Yeah.
Yeah, thank God we don't fly in the LA basin where you've got grids and just concrete and grids.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there you got the ocean, so you can,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
west or southwest or
sure.
sometimes south, depending on where you're at. But
That's true. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Okay.
the other thing I'll say about the time around a 360-degree turn and tying this visual awareness to the earth outside below us is that for many of us, if we're talking about the concept of going cross country, we're flying something that has an audio variometer. If you're flying club ships or you're flying something with very basic equipment, and you are visually looking to the variometer for information about the strength of the lift, you can't glue your nose to the variometer.
Yeah.
And the part that becomes relevant about that is a 360, 45 bank, 50 knots. John Chapman will confirm for me, I'm sure, is going to be in the 22-second neighborhood. Everybody's not going to stay perfectly at 50, and they're not going to stay perfectly at 45 bank, but it's going to be 25, 22 seconds around that circle. If you haven't looked outside during 2 circles because you're looking at the variometer, the guy in cruise flight in his SR-22 or his Cessna 182 or his Bonanza or his Mooney has come 2 miles closer to you. So understanding how much time it takes to make a circle and understanding how much you are enticed to visually look at a vario if you don't have an audio helps to increase the awareness that we need to orient ourselves to outside and keep that visual alert going.
Yeah, I'll concur with that. When I was flying with a gentleman in a Pipistrel with a nice fancy dashboard with the, you know, the electronics and the, you know, nice little showing the green, orange, blue, green, orange, blue, and he's staring at that thing, and we're close. Yeah, and we're scraping rocks in Lone Pine. I'm like, can you look outside the window, please? Yeah. Great. All right. Well, I think probably pretty much exhausted this topic for one night, I think.
1 point.
Sure.
Some years back, there was an article in Soaring by an Apache helicopter pilot who was also a glider pilot. And he was doing some training using the infrared night vision during the daytime. And he saw a phenomenon and examined it, and it looked pretty clear that the Apache infrared night vision can give you an image of a thermal. And apparently the instructors called them gray ghosts because it was like a monochrome display. So I wonder if anybody has done or knows of any research done using the various infrared cameras. I don't recall what wavelength that was in to actually see thermals.
I don't know. I think we don't have access to this stuff that the military grade that will do. Last I heard, it was like not enough difference to be able to see it like that. But yeah,
Well,
that's gonna.
He proved it by flying into one of these gray ghosts and climbing at way reduced throttle. So it was obviously a thermal.
It certainly makes sense.
In
Yeah,
an Apache helicopter?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder what.
Seems a little far-fetched to me. I think that's folklore mostly.
Yeah, actually,
It's real. They could see dust, bugs, and the debris that was carried aloft in the so it was
I
actually
believe that. Yeah, I would believe
it was
that. Yeah.
reflectivity from the junk in the thermal, not the temperature of the thermal.
Oh,
And it
Yeah,
was
that would make
real.
sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
We are limited by space, weight, dollars, and electricity.
Yeah.
Well,
No truer words.
the thermal cameras have become much more compact and affordable over the, I don't know, 10, 12 years since this article was out. The big question is, are they in the right wavelength to pick up these effects?
Yeah, what was he seeing the temperature of? I mean, the air mass is so low compared to, most of those cameras look at,
Massive,
the
huge.
heat given off by an object or something, and the heat given off by air is so much less because there's so much less
Well,
matter there.
when I was working with lasers, we were working with line of sight communication systems, and we had a collimated beam, and you could see the heat coming off your hand in the changes in the speckle pattern in the infrared beam. So what you you don't have to have much definition of temperature. Your eyes pick up the relative movement. And, like I said, he seemed to prove to him and his instructor that the gray ghosts were thermals. So,
Yep.
Do you,
Well,
do you
think
have to
it's
have the
an-
military grade stuff to do it?
but like I said, the cameras have gotten
Yeah.
smaller and more compact. They
Yeah.
have cell phone thermal cameras now.
Yeah, yeah.
One question,
Yeah.
Maury, actually, I thought about this and discussed with one of the friends. So one question and the other guy raised was, usually the thermal camera cannot penetrate the canopy. So you need a special glass to allow the thermal imaging to penetrate the canopy. I think the military stuff, they have special lenses and they're mounted out of the canopy of the helicopter, maybe.
Yeah, they're in the sensor dome at the front. And they have special windows for each camera.
So
Yeah.
I will say I
you
have
go.
one of those cell phone FLIR devices, and I would volunteer to ride with someone and stick it out the window and see if we can look for thermals.
Oh, I hate
Sounds
seeing
like a
people.
Sounds
very
like a
good
lot of fun.
project.
Yeah, I hate seeing pictures of people sticking their hands outside their canopy window. Okay.
Well, they do all
Hold
those,
on tight,
Put it on a
baby.
stick.
Yeah,
they
put on a
do all
stick. There you
those
go.
photographs
I know.
out of the little window.
I know. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. This has been a great discussion, and big thanks to Bill Palmer for joining us again. And we will look forward to everybody returning in 2 weeks to hear Keith Schwab. Last year, he talked about his experiences in wave soaring, and he's going to return for round 2 of how to survive in wave soaring. So please do return and come back in 2 weeks, which will be February 22nd. Again, the recording is going to be on YouTube at the Antelope Valley Soaring YouTube channel. So please do go back and check that. Please do the like and share thing, so we can spread the word and get more new members and new pilots out there when they stumble on this stuff when they're noodling around on the internet. So thanks again for everyone joining us, and have a good night, rest of your week, and stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Night.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Cindy.